Politics. Folks today can't get enough of it. Whether it's Brexecution, President Trump or Comrade Corbyn, nothing unites people like a friendly chat about politics. But this episode of Fact Me Up isn't about the politics of today. Instead, it's about the politics from off of history as we run down Brighton's top 10 members of parley argument. So cut a ribbon, kiss a baby and roll titles. Brighton got its first MPs, two of them, in 1832. Prior to then, there were just two MPs representing the whole of Sussex. The 1832 Reform Act rejigged the electoral system and gave big towns like Brighton MPs of their own. And both of that first duo make our list. Isaac Newton Wheatley came from a family involved in the 3 Bs, brewing, banking and construction building. Despite sounding like a CBeebies show, the Wheatleys were largely responsible for funding Shoreham Harbour. They also tried to get a forerunner of Brighton Marina built around the Chain Pier. When the family's bank collapsed, wiping out the savings of many Brightonians, Wheatley stood down as an MP. His party, the Radicals, were so embarrassed by all this they didn't field a candidate in the ensuing by-election. Fellow radical George Faithful, a preacher and lawyer, was super radical, probably one of the leftiest politicians of his day. He called for the immediate abolition of slavery and the British Army and the introduction of universal male suffrage and annual general elections. The people of Brighton didn't take kindly to these views and he was voted out after a single term. In an outburst that wouldn't look out of place today, he blamed his failure to be re-elected on the media. George promptly started his own local weekly, the Brighton Patriot and Lewis Free Press, but this didn't seem to help as he lost at the next general election too. Henry Fawcett, blinded in a shooting accident, was a big campaigner for votes for women. He proposed to Elizabeth Garrett, the UK's first female doctor, mayor and magistrate, but she turned him down. So he married her sister. Later made Postmaster General, he introduced many innovations to the post office, including parcel post, saving stamps and postal orders. James Lloyd Ashbury entered several yachts in the America's Cup, blaming the Americans for cheating every time he lost. After politics, he tried to raise sheep in New Zealand before disappearing off the radar. An unidentified body found in London in 1895, a suicide by chloridine, a medicine made from laudanum, cannabis and chloroform, was later identified as his. Charles Thomas Stanford was a member of the richest family in Sussex. In 1922, to celebrate standing down from Parliament, he bought Lewes Castle and donated it to the nation. His main home, Preston Manor, was gifted to the people of Brighton upon his death 10 years later. Stat attack! John Lord Erskine served a single year as MP for Brighton after having represented Weston-super-Mare for many years. A strong supporter of Indian Home Rule, which his party leader Winston Churchill vehemently opposed, this crushed Erskine's ministerial ambitions. He also served as governor of Madras. The city, not the curry. Sir Alfred Cooper Olsen holds the ongoing record for the most votes received and the biggest majority at any general election. He amassed 75,205 votes when re-elected as a Conservative MP for Brighton in 1931. It's a record that will almost certainly never be broken. William Teeling was an Irish author who wrote a book in 1939 about links between the Catholic Church and the rise of Nazism. He once walked all the way from Newcastle to London, staying in hostels, for an article about homelessness. In Parliament, he was at that time the prime advocate for the building of a Channel tunnel. Howard Johnson was a prominent animal rights campaigner, using his position in Parliament to campaign against hunting, the whipping of horses during races, etc. Locally, he campaigned against police corruption, much of it related to the racetrack, as well as wanting the banning of saucy postcards and trying to get the army to clear the beach of seaweed. Annoyed at his anti-hunt stance, the 1959 Southdown Hunt actually charged through Johnson's back garden in Ditchling, with one huntsman getting off his horse, whip in hand, and offering to teach the MP a lesson. Increasingly at odds with his Conservative colleagues, Johnson stood down as a Member of Parliament. Unlike most people, he became more left-wing as he got older, joining the Liberal Democrats, becoming Vice Chair of the League Against Cruel Sports, and later switching to Labour and becoming a strong supporter of nuclear disarmament and hunt saboteurs. David James, not the former football goalie, was Sir John Mills's body double in the 1948 movie Scott of the Antarctic. A big believer in the Loch Ness Monster, he set up the first investigation agency into the creature. It's thought that public mocking of his Nessie beliefs swung the 1964 election against him. He lost to his Labour opponent by just 7 votes. And that completes our roundup of Brighton's 10 most interesting politicians from off of history. Vote early, vote often, vote Fact Me Up. In next week's rocking episode, Fact Me Up looks at musical milestones from off of the history of Brighton.